Good morning, everybody. My name is Joe, and I'm a weapon of mass instruction. Today is Sunday, October 14th, 2012, and it's just after 11 o'clock in the morning. So right now I'm actually on my way out to perform a mission, so to speak. I'm gonna grab some last things for my daughter's birthday party. So I put on my open carry rig and I'm out the door, and when I get there I'm going to film that and probably put it up with whatever dumb commentary I can come up with while I'm shopping, and hopefully you'll be able to enjoy that. But for the meantime, if you'll recall, I mentioned that I had survivalism on my mind, and sorry. Oh, nice. Cirrus clouds that look strangely uniform. A straight band across the sky. Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Alright. So, the reason I started thinking of all the survivalism stuff all of a sudden was from playing Borderlands and hello. And just, I don't know where my head was. I kept on wishing that, they would just drop the hammer already, so I wouldn't have to worry about all the mundane stuff anymore. I could just get right down to, survival mode. But there's some things that's important for anybody who wants to prep for disaster, or, wants to be ready for anything, really, to think about. Even before you get into a survival situation, remember that with the changing of the seasons, that also requires a changing of your loadout, so to speak. Things to put in your bug out bag. Of course, you've got the basics: food and water. 3 days worth of water. That's very important. That's key. In fact, I would recommend that you pack the water in your bug out bag first. That's not to say put it all on the bottom, but make sure that you got room for 3 days worth of water, which comes out to about 3 gallons, 1 gallon per day, because you're going to be walking, running, doing whatever. It's going to take up a lot of energy, and your body's going to use up a lot of that water that you need to survive. Food, 3 days worth of rations, and food doesn't take up as much space as the water does, which is nice, but at least 3 days worth of food, and that's key as well. You can go, remember the 3-3-3 rule. You can go 3 minutes without air before you start suffering permanent effects from asphyxiation. 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water. Alright, before you start suffering really bad dehydration, and 3 weeks without food. So the 3 days rations, that's really nothing compared to what you're probably going to need in an extended situation, but it's a good start, and it's a good fallback plan if you can't find forage and you can't hunt. So those are your basics. And of course, you might want to prep for the air as well, depending on your environment. For example, if you're on the coastline, down by the shore, and you're planning for a survival situation, you might want to get something like, at the very least, like maybe a snorkel that's lightweight and it helps you breathe while you're swimming, but you still have to go to the surface to get air. But maybe if you have the fundage available when you're prepping, grabbing an air tank and a scuba system, wetsuit and all of that, if you already know how to work it, that's also something to look up too. I'm no expert on scuba gear and diving, but I do know that with all the rubber type substances in the system, it's important to check those seals and check the mouthpiece and all that. Make sure there's no dry rot or any cracks that would cause water to get in or air to slip out when it's not supposed to. stuff like that. But like, if you're on the shoreline, that might be something to think about because you never know which way you're going to be driven to if you're trying to survive. You know what I mean? But also don't be afraid to ditch it if it seems apparent that it's going to be no use to you. So like, if you're on the East Coast and for whatever reason you get driven west, you're obviously in an area now where you're less likely to run into deep water or any situation where you got to dive. You know what I mean? But anyway, back to the bag. Clothing in the colder weather. This is really the heart of it, what I was going to talk about. Don't forget to change whatever clothing you had in your bug out bag over the summer to stuff that's going to be more appropriate for colder weather. Thermals, polypropylene material is good. Fleece or wool is good. And then there was fleece was my favorite, but you know what I mean. All those cold weather type clothes. Now, regardless of your body type, your chemistry, whatever your makeup is, all right. Sorry. You should also keep some t-shirts or some lighter clothing as well, like long sleeve t-shirts, cotton stuff too. The reason for that is if you're forced to hike, you're probably going to break a sweat pretty quick and easy, regardless of the weather. Believe it or not, sweat is going to happen even in the cold. It's just the way most people's bodies work, which means that if you're wearing warming layers while you're hiking, unless you're in an extremely cold environment, like the Arctic, you know what I mean, like, Alaska in the wintertime, stuff like that. In most colder environments, stuff like Pennsylvania in the wintertime, even Chicago or Illinois in the wintertime. It's far north enough where you can get frostbite, hypothermia, and all that bad stuff, but it's not so far north that you're gonna like freeze instantly if you're out there in the cold. When you're exerting yourself, you're gonna be putting out lots and lots of heat, all right? So you don't want those extra warming layers on while you're exerting yourself, because it's gonna trap all that moisture. And what will end up happening is, as soon as you're done with your hike or whatever you got to do, forced march through the woods, whatever, if you've got those warming layers on already, then your sweat is going to be there in a lot more volume than it would have been already. All right, so that's a very bad idea. You're going to keep those warming layers for when you're breaking camp, when you're settled down and you're in a hidey hole or something like that, and you're not actually moving a lot. That's when it's key, because your body isn't going to work up that heat on its own, as well as when you're hiking or climbing or moving very rigorously. So that's the thing, be prepared for the cold. Cold weather gear is important, but also remember, don't wear all that cold weather gear while you're exerting yourself. And I saw it plenty of times in the Marine Corps, even as far south as North Carolina. It actually gets real cold in the wintertime, but because the base and the city that housed it was right on the shore, all that salt got into the air off the ocean, and it pretty much stayed there year round. And so we could have weather that was like 20 degrees, but we would never see snow. You know what I mean? Nothing froze because there was all that salt. But there was always one or two, anytime we had to go on a hump, there was always one or two or more that would say, oh, it's too cold, and we're standing there, we're getting ready for the hump, and we're not quite ready to go yet, and they're all wearing their sweatshirts, or wearing their Gore-tex jacket, or whatever they got, and they feel comfortable. But then we start hiking, like 10, 15, even sometimes 20 miles, and then they start breaking that sweat. We stop for like a 5-minute break, and they're pretty much done for already. It's ridiculous. So that's just an example of what to do and what not to do there. So with the cold weather, it is important, but you're also going to be looking at more space taken up in your bug out bag with that. So don't overdo it. You know what I mean? In a survival situation, there's a good chance that for the first day or more even, you're probably going to be moving a lot more than you would expect. And then after that, once you find a place to hole up, then you're probably going to be moving a lot less than you would expect then. All right. So it's a balancing act, just like with everything else. Stay here for the moment. Finish this up. So that's the first thing. That's, I wanted to talk about the preparation before you actually have to get out on the trail. If you're the kind of person that knows how to hunt or to forage, another thing that would be a good idea is to have a bag set up to hold your food. By which I mean, something like a shoulder bag, what they would call a man purse, or something like that. It doesn't have to be huge, but something where you could put dried meat or salted meat in there, jerky, whatever food you were able to forage, berries, nuts, stuff like that. So separate compartments would be nice to separate the different types of food, but that's not necessary. But it's important to have that as well, because what you're going to want to do is, if you're in a survival situation, ideally you're going to take food from what is disposable. All right. So if you hunt and you found some deer and you killed it and you stripped off strips of venison and you cooked it up and you dried it and salted it or whatever you did to cure it to make sure it didn't rot, then you're going to want to be eating that first before you dip into your rations that you brought in your bug out bag, if at all possible. The reason for that is that's basically your emergency food. So even though you're in an emergency situation, immediately after you get out of the immediate danger zone, you're pretty much going to be thinking about how to find more food, how to find more water. Water is the same sort of thing. If you find a source, a spring or a brook, all right, first be really careful that you're not drinking contaminated water, contaminated with bacteria or dirt or even other stuff. But pretty much the best way to do that is to run it through a filter before anything else. Run it through a filter to get rid of all the dirt and sediments. All right. Then you're gonna want to boil it. All right. Put it up to boiling temperature for 15 minutes. Okay. So you're basically not gonna put on a rolling boil, but you're gonna keep it just bubbling for that whole time. And then after you're done with that 15-minute boil, at that point you're going to use whatever water purification tablets or system that you have, whether it's the droplets or the tablets. Either way, it doesn't matter. You're going to use all three of those if possible in order to make sure that all that dirt, sediment, bacteria, whatever is out of that water. And I would recommend drinking the purified water, before you dip into your water that you packed previously, because you already know that that's clean, but that should also be a last resort. So that's that. Eat and drink what you find before you dip into your supply. Pack that warming gear, the cold weather stuff, gloves, wool hat, balaclava, ski mask. Those are all some good ideas as well. But again, be prepared to take them off if you have to do some sort of an exertion like hiking or climbing. And that's pretty much it. That's going to be your preparation and early survival. Next episode I do on this is going to be more about breaking camp, what your campsite should look like And it doesn't have to be picture perfect, but there's some guidelines to keep in mind to make sure that you don't end up drinking shit water, or getting all of your food looted by a freaking bear or stuff like that. So I'll talk about that soon. But first, I gotta go into Turkey Hill, grab some cigarettes, and then go shopping for the party. So I'm gonna leave it off at that. Y'all stay safe now. Peace.